Shall we start? Good morning. It is 10:30. I think it is time to start. Good morning, and I welcome you all to Dr. Ambedkar University Psychology Online Classes. This is Abnormal Psychology, and we'll be taking Unit 1, Historical Perspectives, and I am Madhusudan Rao. So, today's objectives for this session, uh, after completion of this unit, you will be able to differentiate the normality and abnormality. Then you will be understanding the criteria for abnormal behavior and historical and current perspectives of abnormal psychology. At the same time, you'll be learning about abnormal psychology, DSM-4, ICD-10, and DSM-5, maybe DSM-5TR2. So let us, before we deep dive into the topic, let us try to understand the uh, what is there in the historical perspective of the psychology today. So in this, we are going to understand about maladjustments, emotional disturbances, and mental disorders, or the states of physical or psychological abnormalities. These states or conditions can affect anyone, irrespective of their social or economic status. No age, no gender, no poor, rich, or anything. It can affect anybody. That is what it meant. Mental disorders can be both a source of suffering and a subject of scientific study. Abnormal psychology is the scientific field that studies and treats these disorders. It is not just about studying the abnormal behavior. We also, or the professionals also do therapeutic researchers with the previous studies and they innovate new things. It's a combination of many other sciences too. This field is crucial for aspiring mental health professionals like you all. Abnormal psychology, a subdivision of psychology, focuses on mental processes and behaviors of individuals with these abnormalities. So now let us try to understand the terminology and definitions and what is it actually means. All these things we'll try to understand. Abnormality. Abnormal psychology is a branch of psychology, as you already know it. It deals with the unusual behavior, emotions, and thoughts. It studies, it studies and treats patterns that could indicate mental disorders. It focuses on individuals who deviate from societal norms. That is, whatever is not normal according to society for a longer period is called abnormal. Then, it, nature of psychology and other things. So, abnormal refers to significant deviation from norms. Norm is nothing but set of rules followed by that particular society or culture or country or a state or ethnic groups. These are all normal things which they follow, which is away from that or deviating from that is called abnormal, not necessarily negative act. So you can't, say abnormal if somebody is doing against your will. You can't say it is abnormal. You have to measure that with the societal norms and rules. So it's key for managing mental health, developing treatments, and promoting awareness. Now, defining abnormality is challenging as it varies with culture, society, and individual factors. As I already told you, it is very difficult to judge. Looking at one culture, you can't, generalize every culture alike. It addresses behaviors causing distress, functional difficulties, and social disruptions. Social norms define normal versus abnormal. Social norms, as I told you, whatever is right for you may not be right for the other country or other culture. Okay. So now talking about abnormality and abnormal psychology. Now let us try to define abnormal psychology. In the perspective of these psychologists or psychiatrists, theorists, and philanthropists also there in this field. That is the reason I said philanthropists too. So abnormal psychology is a field of psychology that specializes in understanding abnormal behavior. This was said by Coleman in 1988. Then it is considered with the study, assessment, treatment, and prevention of psychopathological or maladaptive behaviors that is detrimental to an individual or a group. Who said this? Carson, Butcher, and Menake. So abnormal psychology studies deviation or variance from so-called normal patterns. So-called normal means, he said, a particular society has particular norms. Another society may have another norm. So he said so-called norms. You will call it normal, but somebody else may call it abnormal. So he is assigning, it's sort of defining normality with the cultural context. As he said, so-called normal. It differs from place to place. So it is defined as a specialized field dealing with personality disturbances and behavior disorders. Kisker in 1964. So Sarasan and others described about abnormal psychology as the area within psychology focuses on maladaptive behaviors, its causes, consequences, and treatments. So by reading all the definitions, what we can assess abnormal psychology can be defined as when a mental health deteriorates, problems can arise in areas like low self-regard, distortion of reality, reduced competence, anxiety, anger, heightened psychological reactivity. Abnormal psychology deals with problems related to capacities to think rationally and logically, cope effectively with the stress and challenges, and demonstrate emotional stability and growth. So, if you can understand all these things in depth, then we can understand what is normal, what is abnormal to the cultural context and biological context. Also, you should understand all these things will be dealing with in abnormal psychology. Now, talking about dictionary meanings and other things, we'll look into that. The concept of normality and abnormality. The term normal is derived from norma. Norma means it's a carpenter rule or square. Have you ever noticed, carpenter marking wooden logs or doors while marking with a what do you call a scale called sir square, set square or ruler. He says that ruler. So that particular thing is very 90 degrees. 90 degrees. At the time, the what do you call these people? They said they used to measure anything. Just a deviation is abnormal. The scale is 90%, 90 degrees, and they always believed that that is how the rules should be in the society. If anybody deviates from that particular angle, is called abnormal. So they have chosen that particular scale to be scale's name as norma to be normal and abnormal. A norma is a standard or a rule or a pattern in English dictionary. Similarly, normal meaning conforming to the standard, usual, natural, or serving to establish a standard. Okay. Now, from psychological perspective, normal people or average people in the psychological traits, intelligence, and personality stability, and do not have mental disorders. Normal relates to being part of the normal curve or bell curve, generally called as bell curve, that is in between the normal distribution curve, center of the normal distribution curve. To simply say, that is within the range of 68 or 97, you can even say 97 uh, percentile. So 68, then this is normal distribution curve. As you know, you have studied that in your second year, second semester. So normal people fall into the normal section means that is from the mean how far you are deviating from the center according to the bell-shaped curve. The word abnormal comes from the Latin word ab. Ab means away from. Ab, away from. Norma. Norma means average. It's a Latin word. Ab, norma. Abnormal. So literally it means away from the norma or average. Away from the norma or average. So according to Merriam-Webster dictionary, abnormal means deviating from the norma or average, unusual or exceptional behavior. So that is about the definition and completely in-depth analysis of abnormal dictionary meaning and normal meaning too. Now, adaptive, maladaptive behavior. What are these? So we will look into statistical criteria, social criteria, personal discomfort, maladaptive, all these things one by one, and you will understand it in depth. Statistical criterion. This refers to the behavior that are statistically rare in the population. If everybody has it, will you say it abnormal? You will never say it. So there is a portion of population who are really abnormal. So based on if the criteria matches, then you will say that they are abnormal. Similarly, that is based on the statistical evidence. You will say that they are abnormal. Now coming to social criteria. So behavior that deviates from societal norms or expectations are considered to be abnormal. Personal distress or discomfort. If a behavior causes significant distress or discomfort to the individual, it may be considered abnormal. Okay. Now, maladaptive behavior, behaviors that interfere with an individual's ability to function in daily life, such as fulfilling roles in family, work, community, and all these things are seen as abnormal. You, you know, there are some set of rules, regulations which you have to fulfill. If you're not able to do that, then you're definitely known as abnormal. And if that persists for a longer period, not just 1 day, 2 days, or a week or so, that can happen due to stress or anxiety or something. So there are certain criteria where and when you can say that they are abnormal. So after completion of this, you may understand about that, how to call, why to call, when to call abnormal. Deviation from ideal. Any behavior that deviates from an ideal standard of behavior, thought, or emotion can be considered as abnormal. So now, as I said, it is important to note that no single criteria is sufficient to explain abnormal behavior. There is no single criteria. There is no single test to simply say that. Cultural relativity must also be considered, as what is considered abnormal in one culture may be normal in another culture. Furthermore, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, DSM-5, characterizes abnormal behavior by one or more of these criteria: maladaptive behavior, personal distress, statistical rarity, and violation of social norms. So, one or more of these criteria which are mentioned in DSM, right? Then only you can say that. And there are other set of rules also. If that satisfied that particular rule, then only you can call abnormal. Now, what are the historical perspective? There is a lot to cover in historical perspective. So I've seen that the most important things have been put on the screen here. So every point is important. I really wish you all to note it down if at all you have pen with you. So now, prehistoric and ancient beliefs. Abnormal behavior was often seen as the work of evil spirits, demons, gods, or witches. Treatments included, that removing the part of the brain, skull, and letting of the evil spirit, and exorcism, etc. And these are extreme type of treatments which cost many lives. So that was the beginning. What we have, recorded evidences have shown that, a skull, part of the skull has been removed, including the brain or whatever. No. So proofs are there. So it has come into the psychological studies. So Greco-Roman thoughts. Greek physician Hippocrates, Hippocrates and suggested that mental disorder has natural the causes and were akin or to the physical disorders. He classified mental disorder into melancholy, cholia, and mania, and phrenitis, and that is called brain fever. He believed mental illness could be treated like any other disorder. So that was something, very important period where he assessed mental disorders based on these criteria, and now you know that it can be treated as any other disorder. So the people who are away from their period. So Middle Ages, during this period, abnormal behavior was often associated with supernatural phenomena such as demonic possessions, like what do you say, bhoot pret are present, and it is troubling them. దెయ్యాలు ఉన్నాయి, రాక్షసులు brain లో, and something as he possess devil inside the person, and they give lot of harsh treatment to them, and they when they exhaust and fell down, they said demon is gone. Until next time, we'll see. So such treatments were there in Middle Ages. Then Renaissance, the humanism movement began, and emphasizing understanding the compassion. Doctors started using the power of suggestions on human mind, uh, today known as hypnosis. Many psychologists used it. Hypnosis. One such thing was used by Sigmund Freud too. Sort of, we'll discuss about that. Right now, in 18th and 19th century, the New Age reform began, and inhuman treatments were being phased out through education and mental illness. So Williams opened a New York retreat in England. York retreat in England, a house that sought to provide humane treatments for those with mental illness. So there, they were treating, patients with kindness. That is what all it means. And he opened a mental illness center or something like that, where they have taken care of the patients with patients. The modern approaches, there have been three main approaches to abnormal behavior. One is supernatural, biological, and psychological traditions. Abnormal psychology revolves around two major paradigms. For example, mental disorders. Excuse me 1 second. So, sorry, so modern approaches have been three main approaches to the abnormal behavior: the supernatural behavior and the psychological traditions. Abnormal psychology revolves around two major paradigms, and for explaining mental disorders, like psychological paradigm and the biological paradigm. So there are two major things which, based on that only, modern approach has been emphasized and focused on. Uh, it is important to note that what is considered abnormal is subject to cultural and historical dynamics. The understanding and treatment of abnormal behavior has evolved significantly over a time and continue to do so. It's a continuous process. That is what it means to say. Reappearance of the scientific approach. Previously, they stopped believing scientific approach. Then again, there's so many other approaches. Then again, they came back to scientific approaches. So they looked into the empirical data, proofs. Okay, in the late 17th century, known as Age of Reason, everything was questioned. And in the 18th century, known as the Age of Enlightenment, society began to shift from religious dogma to reason and science to explain natural phenomena and human behavior. So as the studies went on, instead of entrusting everything to religious aspects or anything, they started questioning and science to explain natural phenomena and human behavior. That with the proofs, evidence. So Greek thinkers of their time risked their lives to challenge the concept of witchcraft or demonology in explaining behaviors of mental illness. Their struggle led to emergence of scientific thinking and reasoning, establishing modern thought of field. So, where Jean in up to 1588, 1515 to 1588, a physician suggested that witches were actually mentally and physically sick people. Witches, I think you all know it. Witches were mentally and physically sick people. They are not witches are the people who possess, demon or something like that. It's not like that. So he initially is the person who coined the term. They are mentally and physically sick people. Similar, and he also, you can say, he is regarded as the real modern father of real modern psychiatry, or first specialist and the real founder of modern psychiatry. Where Jean, despite facing vehement protests for being ahead of his times, his works were banned until 20th century. Imagine. He has shown so much proofs and extensive study into this particular field, and still his work was banned up to 20th century. Then Vincent L. Paul, Saint Vincent L. Paul, he risked his life to condemn demonology and witch horror, and declaring mental disorder as significant as physical diseases and advocating for human and medical treatment. So in 15th century and 16th century saw a shift from superstition and ignorance to reason, leading to naturalistic and non-theological and physical treatment of mental disorders. Henry VIII, King of England, was inspired to convert the monastery of St. Mary of Bethlehem in London into mental hospital in 1547, marking the beginning of asylums in Europe and America. However, the patients in these asylums were subjected to inhumane conditions, including dark cells, physical restraints, starvation, solitary confinements, and other tortures. They were, uh, chained and kept in the rooms for days together without, food uh, or anything, beatings. There continuously to physical assaults were happening, and so many things, But that was the beginning of asylum. Now, French physician. So Philip Pinel or Pinel, I think, in 1745 to 1826 was the first to protest against these asylums, insisting on removing the chains in the Paris hospital, which proved to be effective. You can see the great personality to your extreme right top corner. So in England, William Chuk established York Retreat, an asylum that treats mental illness with kindness and consideration. He has taken, this the person in the middle of the screen. I mean, to the extreme right middle photograph. He also done extensive work, and he has spent entire his life in treating people in asylums. Now, these approaches revolutionized and the treatment of the mental illness, leading to humanistic approach in America through Benjamin Rush in 1845 to 1745 to 1813, known as the father of American psychiatry. The person to the extreme right below. As I said, he is the father of American psychiatry, Benjamin Rush. Rush theories led to scientific theories and therapies, initiating the mental hygiene movement for the prevention and cure of mental disorders and the prevention of mental health. They started taking steps to prevent instead of just treating. See, the modern era treatment of mental disorder can be tracked back to the efforts of these individuals in 18th and 19th century. These, you can say, modern era of treatment of mental disorders started with these people. Then, in continuation to that, Dorothy Dix, a teacher, exposed the poor condition of mental hospitals. In her work, led to 32 new mental hospitals in US, and she protested everywhere, and that led to 32 new mental hospitals in US. Despite improvements in hospital conditions remain poor, conditions remain poor in 19th century. These conditions led to calls for reforms in 20th century. So you can say reform. These are people who are reformists, we can say, in this field. So new theory and therapies emerged, focusing on scientific reasoning. Emil Kraepelin, this gentleman has done wonderful work in this field too. Introduced a medical model of mental disorder. He suggested each mental illness is unique with its own cause and symptoms. He said each mental illness is unique and treatment is also unique. So he suggested each mental illness is unique and its own cause and symptoms. He believed schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and physical causes had physical causes. His model was supported by evidence from a disease called general paresis. Now this gave hope for better understanding of other mental disorders too. The medical model influenced much for the current terminology of mental health, emphasizing symptoms over features of abnormal behavior. Medical model and advance over demonology advocates for compassionate treatment by professionals. So scientific approach era, this medical model influenced, many, even the current terminology is from that medical era only. So emphasizing symptoms over features of abnormal behavior, the medical model and advance over demonology advocates from passionate treatments by professionals. For example, people who involved in this particular approach is one is Anton Mesmer, then Ambrose August, and Jean Charcot. What they have done, the psychological approach emerged due to the inability to find organic cause for some causes. This approach was historically linked to Anton Mesmer, who practiced mesmerism or hypnosis. So if you remember, अरे mesmerize कर दिया, mesmerize చేస్తున్నాడు అంటాం కదా, that is what called mesmerism. It is derived from mesmer. So Ambrose August and Brahnim used hypnosis to treat hysteria, leading to the formation of the Nancy School. This gentleman, so Jean in 1825 to 1893 disagreed with the Nancy School, insisting that brain changes caused hysteria. The anatomy of the brain or chemical changes or something is happening in the brain that is causing hysteria. That is what he said. Despite being proved wrong, he sparked interest in the hysteria. The Nancy School's success marked the first recognition of psychologically caused mental disorders, leading to more research on psychological factors in mental disorders. Continuation with scientific approaches. Most probably 90% of the psychology students would immediately recollect Sigmund Freud and his work. Similarly, Skinner and Carl Rogers, William Wundt. So many psychologists. But these were the people who laid foundation to all the psychology. The earlier slides, we were looking at the historical perspectives. Now we are coming to present era or scientific approach era of reasoning to the present era. Now, Sigmund Freud, 1856 to 1939, introduced psychoanalysis, and he used hypnosis and free association on his patients, leading to discovery of unconscious mind. Freud also used dream analysis to understand emotional problems. Then again, Cattell in 69 to 1944 introduced experimental method in US with Bross instruments. Then Whitmer established the first American clinic at University of Pennsylvania, focusing on mentally deficient children. He is considered a founder of clinical psychology. The behavioral perspective, which emphasized the role of learning in human behavior, emerged as challenge to the psychoanalysis. J.B. Watson shifted the focus of psychology over behavior, rejecting the subjective analysis of the Freudian school. The work of Ivan Pavlov, many of you know Ivan Pavlov's work and Skinner's work. So he introduced conditioning styles, classical and operant conditioning. Mayer advocated the ellactic approach, emphasizing the fusion of organic, psychological, socio-psychological viewpoint for the diagnosis, understanding of treatment of mental illness. It is not just one approach. He used multiple approaches, combination of approaches to treat some disorders. So the contemporary exodus from the state hospital to current trend. Whenever a psycho or abnormal person is brought to, he was never admitted in any place. So many psychological issues or abnormal patients were brought to government hospitals, state-owned hospitals. So after Second World War, mass exodus has been seen due to the invention of phenolphthalein in 1950. These antipsychotic drugs allowed many patients to live independently in less restrictive community settings. For example, because they were using drug and they are able to cope up with the situations and the conditions, they are not restricted to the state-owned hospitals. They were given treatment at house or community centers or the caregivers. So many hospitals have been vacated at that particular moment, especially in 1960s to 1980s. So the community mental health centers were established in 1963 to provide ongoing support and care for former hospital residents. To be very clear, people who were staying in hospital for treatment were sent out with the support of medication, and they were caregivers who were taking care of these people. Imagine deinstitutionalization has led to decline of number of patients in mental hospitals in US especially, dropped from 55,000 to 550,000 to in 1952, fewer patients in 1980. Despite some institutions having deplorable conditions, modern institutions generally provide more human care than those in 19th and 20th centuries. So historical evolution of psychology and psychopathology or abnormal psychology has moved from superstitious beliefs to naturalism, humanitarianism, empiricism, and finally to an ellactic approach based on medical and psycho-social models. Now, in continuation to that, we'll try to understand certain things in simplified form. Key principles in understanding the treatment of mental illness include emphasizing on scientific and ellactic approach to understand behavior. Integration of all related areas of knowledge. It is not one method. Different methods in coordination, in sync, you're going to treat that particular individual. That is what it meant. Use of various therapies, either separately or in combination. Greater focus on humanitarian ones. Teamwork among the psychiatrists, clinical psychologists, social workers, and other specialists. As I said, it is not just one way of treating. It is in these all people used to sit together, or the report has been seen by all the people and come to one conclusion through the individual based on the need. Increased public education and awareness about the abnormal behavior. Prevention oriented programs for mental health. Development in mental health centers with professional help. So, mental health development centers were there, or programs were created with the help of professionals, and prevention is better than cure. That is what the theme here. Classification of abnormal behavior. Now we come into the classifications. Classifications are done by using what? DSM, that is Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, is an official guidelines by the American Psychiatric Association used for diagnosing psychological disorders. It is used by clinicians, researchers, and psychologists. For a diagnosis to be made, two criteria within the DSM must be met. As I said, based on one, you can't assess anybody. At least two, they say two criteria. The disordered behavior must originate within the person and not be a reaction of external factors. The second criteria, disorder must be involuntary. It is not voluntary, involuntary, meaning the individual cannot control their symptoms. Is voluntary means you can control. Involuntary, no. Just like, heartbeat is, are you able to control your heartbeat? No, you can't. So involuntary, these things happen. That is what it meant. Anyway, now DSM-4-TR revised in 2000. Now we have DSM-5-TR2. There are 5 separate axes in DSM-4-TR. Axis 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So in axis 1, most psychological disorders were mentioned. Then in 2, personality disorders and mental retardations. 3, general medical conditions. 4, psychosocial and environmental stresses. 5, global assessment functioning. Now, International Classification of Diseases, ICD, is a standard diagnostic tool for epidemiology, health management, and clinical purposes. ICD-10 is the latest one. And this classifications, this classification and used for coding diseases, injuries, impairments, and other health problems and their manifestations and causes. What does ICD has? The main two divisions we can say, ICD 10 CM, clinical modification. CM means clinical modifications. This is the diagnosis code set that replaces ICD-10 9CM, volume 1 and 2, and is used for all healthcare systems. I think in your exam, they may ask you about DSM and ICD. Just have a look at it thoroughly. ICD-10 PCS. PCS means Procedure Code System. This is the code set for inpatient procedures that replaces ICD-10 CM, volume 3. It is used for facility reporting of hospital inpatient services only and does not replace the current procedural terminology. Now, classifications of abnormal psychology in continuation to that, DSM-5 updated in early 2013 and is the first DSM to use an Arabic numerals in the title and considered as a living document. It recommends collapsing axis 1, 2, 3 into one axis containing all psychological disorders and general medical conditions. According to DSM-5, a mental disorder is behavioral and psychological syndrome that occurs in an individual reflects an underlying psychological dysfunction, results in significant distress or disability, is not merely expected response to common stressors or losses, or a culturally sanctioned response to a particular event, is primarily a result of social deviance or conflict with this society. DSM-5 reflects a continuum model in the diagnosis of some disorders, particularly personality disorders, challenging the assumption of DSM-4-TR about defining where normality ends, psychopathology begins. So, DSM-4-TR is defining where normality ends, psychopathology begins. That is what it reflects the continuum. It is not the end, it continuous model. Normality ends, psychopathology begins. Anyway, now the continuation. DSM-5 addresses the problem of differentiating mental disorders from each other, recognizing that certain symptoms show up in a criteria of several different disorders. It introduces instruments to assess variations in fundamental cognitive, emotional, and behavioral processes that cut across many disorders. Now, classification of abnormal behavior. DSM-5 addresses problems of differentiating mental disorders from each other, recognizing that certain symptoms show up in the criteria of several different disorders. It introduces instruments to assess variations in fundamental cognition, emotional, and behavioral processes that cut across many disorders. DSM-5 attempts to better understand cultural variations in expression and characterization of mental disorder, addressing criticism that DSM-4-TR did not sufficiently recognize cultural variations in what is considered healthy or unhealthy. So other notable changes in DSM-5 include reconceptualization of the Asperger's syndrome to an autism spectrum disorder and elimination of a subtype of schizophrenia. Schizophrenia, they eliminated subtypes. So deletion of the bereavement of exclusion of depressive disorder and a renaming of the gender identity disorder to gender dysphoria with a revised treatment plan, inclusion of binge eating disorder as the discrete eating disorder, now renaming the reconceptualization of the paraphilic disorder, similarly removing all the access system and splitting of disorders not otherwise specified into other specified disorders and unspecified disorders. Introduction of more raters or judges about the levels of a trait or presence of or absence of future or diagnosis and consistency reliability. These are the notable changes in DSM-5. Until unless you become a professional, these are all, what do you call, away from your head. So pay attention. What is given, prepare well for your exam. So I've given a timeline from 1870 to 2020. The major events occurred in this period is this. I started with Paul Broca's, and Wernicke's work on brain study of lesions in the brain, etc., to new MEG technologies, incorporating machine learning, etc., identification of resting state network. These are all the timeline in abnormal psychology, reading our brain and behaviors, other things, etc. Now, I think we have come to the end. To summarize entire topic, whether it is purely about history and other things, there is not much, we can speak anything away from the topic. So I just presented whatever is there and relevant to you all. So let us summarize, complete the topic. Abnormal psychology is a scientific study and treatment of mental disorder. The term abnormal means away from the normal or average. It is used to describe people who deviate from the average in psychological traits, intelligence, personality, stability, and or away from any mental disorder. Criteria to determine an emotion, thought, or behavior is abnormal. That includes deviance from norma, statistical deviation, experiences of personal distress, difficulties in adapting to life, demands and functioning effectively. In early ages, people with abnormal behavior were believed to be demons and unholy, and many crude treatments were followed. Abnormal psychology has evolved from an age of superstition to an era of reform and scientific approach. The latest version of Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, that is DSM-5 TR, not 5 TR, TM, actually, sorry, TR, was updated in 2013. Reliability, validity, and standardizations are important for developing and refining clinical assessments techniques. There are different methods for clinical assessment too. These are the very important questions you have in this chapter. The questions which are highlighted in golden yellow color is very important. I would suggest you to go through entire topic. Thank you so much for attending today's online class. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Have a good day.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
క్లాస్లో ఉన్న వాళ్ళు ఇక్కడ ఏం చేశారా నువ్వేలా క్లాస్లో ఉన్నావు ఇప్పుడు ఏమ్మా మణిమల
Yes, sir.
క్లాసు అయిపోయిందా థియరీ వర్క్
Sir, record రాస్తున్నాను, sir.
ఓకే సరే వస్తున్నాను